welcome to tonight's sleep story. Let's drift into a soothing story together as you begin your journey into a restful and rejuvenating sleep. It was an evening that felt different from all the others. A restless sky heavy with clouds, foretelling the arrival of something unseen, something fierce. The wind picked up, swirling in the air like a restless spirit, tugging at the branches of the trees. The distant rumble of thunder echoed through the sky, deep and low, shaking the air with its presence. The spring storm was coming. You could feel it in the atmosphere, like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the storm to break. You, young and full of life, stood by the window of your small cottage, watching as the first drops of rain began to fall. They landed on the leaves, a soft patter, then quickly turned into a heavy downpour, drenching the earth. The wind howled outside, pressing against the walls of your home as if trying to break through. Yet inside it was warm. The fire crackled in the hearth, the flickering light casting shadows on the walls, a comforting contrast to the chaos unfolding outside. But as the storm grew fiercer, something caught your eye. Through the rain-soaked window, you saw a small flash of color amidst the grey landscape. It was faint at first, almost hidden by the thick curtains of rain, but then you saw it more clearly, a vivid splash of purple and gold in the garden, where flowers bloomed in all their vibrant colors. But this one flower stood out. Its petals seemed to glow even in the dimming light, as though it held within it a secret, an allure that couldn't be ignored. Curiosity tugged at you, an impulse you couldn't explain. You pulled on your boots and hurried out the door, feeling the chill of the rain against your skin. The wind stung your face as you rushed to the garden, your heart racing with an anticipation you couldn't quite place. The storm roared around you, the trees bending and swaying. Yet there, amidst the chaos of nature, stood this flower. Unwavering, standing tall despite the storm's fury. It was a sight so surreal it almost felt as if time had stopped, like the world had come to a standstill, just to allow you this moment, to witness this fragile miracle. The flower, with its bright, deep purple petals and golden center, seemed to pulse with life, as if it were the only thing in the entire world that had managed to defy the storm. You knelt beside it, your hands trembling slightly as you reached down to touch the soft petals. They were warm, as if the flower itself carried the warmth of the sun, even though the sky was dark with the weight of the storm. The rain hammered around you, but the flower stood firm, unfazed by the wind and the downpour. It was as though it knew something you did not, as though it had been waiting for this moment, for you to come and see it, to witness its strength. As your fingers brushed against the flower, you felt a deep, inexplicable connection, a bond that seemed to form instantly, as if you and the flower shared some unspoken understanding of the world's trials. The storm was not something to fear, you realized in that moment. It was simply a part of the cycle, something that came and went, something that tested strength and resolve. And just like that flower, you too could weather the storm. For a moment, the storm seemed to soften around you. The wind eased, the rain turned into a gentle drizzle, and for the first time that evening, the air seemed to hold its breath in a peaceful silence. You sat beside the flower, your hands still resting gently on its petals, and you realized that in its quiet beauty, it had offered you something you hadn't expected. A lesson in resilience, in standing firm even when the world around you seemed to be falling apart. The flower, so delicate yet so strong, became a symbol in your heart. You had always thought of yourself as someone who could be easily swept away by life's storms, someone who would bend under pressure, like the trees outside that were swaying violently in the wind. But this flower, this simple, beautiful flower, had shown you a different way. It had shown you that even in the harshest of storms, there was beauty, there was strength, there was always a way to endure. As the storm slowly began to pass, the clouds parting just enough to allow a glimpse of the evening sky, you stood up, a quiet resolve settling within you. The flower would not be moved. It would stay right here, planted firmly in the earth, no matter how strong the winds blew, no matter how fierce the rain came. And in that moment, you promised yourself that you too would be like the flower. You would stand firm, face whatever storms came your way, and learn to live with the beauty that life had to offer, no matter how fleeting. The rain stopped, the wind calmed, and the garden around you began to quiet. The air was crisp now, fresh from the storm, and the earth smelled rich, damp with the rain. You turned back toward the cottage, your heart lighter, the image of the flower still vivid in your mind. The storm was gone, but the lesson it brought would stay with you, a quiet strength in your heart. The days following the storm passed in a gentle blur, each one blending seamlessly into the next as you found yourself returning to the garden with a sense of purpose, a quiet dedication you hadn't known you possessed. The storm had left the air crisp and fresh, its power fading into the distance, but the memory of the flower's resilience stayed with you, clinging to your thoughts like the faintest fragrance. Each morning you rose early before the sun had fully crept over the horizon and wandered to the garden. The flower was still there, standing proud and tall amidst the wet grass, its vibrant petals now slightly more open, catching the soft morning light. You knelt down beside it, your hand reaching out instinctively, and you could feel a warmth in your chest, a soft stir, as if the flower had awakened something deep inside you. You began to care for it with a tenderness that surprised you. You watered the earth around it, gently pulling away the weeds that tried to encroach on its space. The petals had begun to soften and stretch as the days warmed, and you marveled at how something so fragile could endure the brutal storm and still rise, vibrant and full of life. With each passing day, you noticed how the flower seemed to respond to your care. Its color deepened, the petals more pronounced, and the center grew fuller, more radiant. You found yourself talking to it sometimes, telling it your thoughts, your hopes, your quiet fears. At first, it had seemed like an odd thing to do, speaking to a flower, something so small and simple. But as you spent more time with it, you found that it wasn't the flower that was listening. It was you. The act of nurturing it, of tending to something so delicate, made you slow down, made you listen to your own thoughts. You began to feel a strange sense of connection, not just to the flower, but to yourself. The flower, in its quiet way, had become your companion in a world that often seemed too fast, too chaotic. You would sit beside it in the late afternoon, the golden light spilling through the trees, casting long, warm shadows across the garden. The hum of bees filled the air, and the wind moved through the leaves, creating a soft, rhythmic sound that almost felt like a lullaby. You would close your eyes, breathing in the rich, earthy scent of the garden, and for a moment, everything else would fade away. There was only this, only the flower, the gentle breeze, and the peace that settled over you. Some evenings you would sit quietly and watch the stars appear in the sky. The flower's petals, soft and still, would shimmer faintly in the starlight, as if they too were part of the universe, part of the endless cycle of life and death, of light and darkness. You wondered sometimes if the flower understood this cycle, or if it simply lived in the present moment, fully aware of its own beauty, its own fragility. There was something so pure in its existence, so simple, and yet it had taught you more than you had expected. As the days turned into weeks, you found yourself waiting eagerly for each morning's visit to the garden, for the opportunity to check on the flower and ensure it was still thriving. It had become part of your routine, a part of your day that you could not miss. Each time you knelt beside it, you felt a sense of accomplishment, as though your small acts of care were helping something so delicate survive in a world that could be so harsh. But more than that, you began to feel a sense of peace. The flower, in its quiet stillness, had taught you to slow down, to embrace the small moments. It reminded you that life, like the flower, could be fragile, but that fragility was what made it beautiful. The way the petals unfurled slowly over time, the way the flower swayed ever so gently in the breeze, it was all part of the larger picture. Life was not about speed or grand gestures. It was about the moments in between, the quiet spaces where you could just be. One morning, as the dew still clung to the grass, you noticed that the flower had opened fully. Its petals now spread wide, revealing a deep, golden center. It was at its peak, the epitome of beauty, and you stood in awe of it. There, in the soft morning light, you understood something deeper. The flower's purpose wasn't to last forever. It was to exist fully, even if for only a short time, and to bring beauty into the world. It wasn't about the future or the past. It was simply about being in the present, fully alive, fully open to the world around it. And in that moment, you made a silent promise to yourself to live as the flower lived, to take each day as it came, to embrace the beauty of now, without worrying about what tomorrow might bring. You would tend to the garden of your life with the same care you gave to the flower, nurturing it, appreciating it, and accepting its impermanence. The flower had become more than just a plant. It had become a mirror, reflecting back to you your own needs and desires, your own growth. And in that quiet companionship, you had begun to grow too. You had learned that beauty existed in the small, the fragile, and the fleeting. That life was not about holding on to things, but about letting them unfold in their own time, with grace. As the days continued to flow like a calm river, something changed. It was subtle at first, a small shift in the flower's demeanor, like a whisper that only those who paid close attention could hear. You had grown so accustomed to its vibrant beauty, to the soft sway of its petals in the breeze, that you didn't notice the change right away. But one morning, as you approached the garden, something caught your eye. The petals, once a rich shade of purple, were beginning to lose their luster. They had started to curl at the edges, fading into a pale, almost translucent hue. The golden center, which had once radiated warmth, now seemed a little duller. You paused, standing at the edge of the garden, the cool morning air brushing against your skin, and for the first time in what felt like weeks, you felt a pang of worry. The flower, which had become such a central part of your life, was changing. Its beauty was fading. It was still alive, still standing tall, but you could see the subtle signs that its time was running short. You knelt beside the flower, gently cupping one of the wilting petals in your hand. It was softer now, fragile, as if it might break with the slightest touch. The once firm stem had begun to droop slightly. The leaves curled at the edges. It was as though the flower was telling you something that went beyond its fading beauty. There was an undeniable sadness in the air, a sorrow that was impossible to ignore. Your heart ached with an unexpected heaviness. How could something so beautiful, something you had cared for so lovingly, be slipping away? The thought of losing it, of no longer having the flower with you, felt like a deep, hollow emptiness beginning to take root inside you. You had never thought about it before, never considered the fragility of the flower, its transient nature. But now, staring at the fading petals, the realization hit you like a cold gust of wind. The flower's decline seemed almost unnatural, too fast, too soon. You had hoped it would stay vibrant forever, that somehow you could preserve its beauty. But life, as you were beginning to understand, was not like that. Life was fleeting, and beauty, however pure and innocent, was always temporary. Each day, as you visited the garden, the flower seemed to deteriorate further. The rainwater you poured into the soil no longer seemed to revive it. The sunshine you offered seemed to burn it more than nourish it. You began to feel helpless, powerless against the inevitable. You tried everything you could think of, changing the soil, moving it to a shadier spot, even talking to it as you once had when it was strong and vibrant, but nothing seemed to help. The flower was fading, and there was nothing you could do to stop it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the cool night air began to settle in, you sat by the flower, your heart heavy with the weight of the coming loss. You hadn't realized how attached you had become to it. The flower had become your quiet companion, your connection to the simplicity of life. It had taught you how to slow down, how to appreciate the small moments. It had filled you with peace. But now, watching it wither, you felt a deep sorrow, an emptiness that seemed to fill the entire space around you. You sat there for what felt like hours, the stars beginning to twinkle above, the soft rustle of the leaves in the breeze, the only sound. You couldn't pull yourself away. There was something about the flower's decline that felt so personal, so real, like a reflection of something deeper within yourself. It was as though the flower was teaching you the most difficult lesson of all, that nothing, no matter how beautiful, lasts forever. Life was filled with moments of joy and sorrow, and you had to learn to accept both, to let go when the time came. And so, with the weight of this understanding in your heart, you whispered softly to the flower. "I don't want to lose you," you said, your voice barely a breath in the still night air. But even as the words left your lips, you knew the truth. The flower was never yours to keep forever. It had been a gift, a fleeting, beautiful gift, and you'd been lucky enough to witness its bloom. The wind picked up again, and the flower swayed gently, its petals now almost completely faded. The last of the sunlight caught the tips of its leaves, giving them a soft golden glow, as if the flower was holding on just for a little longer, as if it were offering you one final moment of beauty before it let go completely. You stayed by its side that evening, watching as the final traces of its color faded into the soft shadows of the night. And in that quiet, tranquil space, you realized that this too was part of life. The impermanence, the constant ebb and flow of beauty and loss. The flower's brief life, though it had been fleeting, had brought you something priceless. It had taught you to cherish the moment, to savor the present, and to accept that all things must eventually come to an end. The following morning, the flower was gone. Its once vibrant petals had fallen away, leaving only the bare stem behind. But in the stillness of the garden, in the quiet aftermath of its passing, you felt a sense of peace settle over you. You had learned, in the most painful way, the lesson of letting go, of embracing both the beauty and the loss. And in that quiet moment, you knew that the flower's spirit, its lesson, its gift, would stay with you long after it had faded away. You would carry its memory with you, a gentle reminder to cherish the beauty of life, no matter how fleeting it may be. The days after the flower's passing seemed quieter, softer, as if the world around you was gently exhaling, settling into a stillness that you hadn't noticed before. The garden, once full of vibrant color and movement, now felt subdued. The soil where the flower had stood was empty, a small patch of earth left behind that seemed to carry the weight of its absence. The wind whispered through the trees, and the birds continued their songs, but there was a distinct silence within you, an emptiness where the flower had been. But with this emptiness, something else was growing, a quiet understanding, a deeper awareness that had taken root within you. The sorrow of losing the flower still lingered, a soft ache that you carried with you, but it no longer felt overwhelming. In the days that followed, you began to notice small shifts in yourself. You found comfort in the silence, in the way the world moved around you, unaffected by the pain you had felt. The flower had left, but its lesson was becoming clearer, more vivid with each passing day. You had always known that life was fleeting, but the flower had shown you just how precious each moment truly was. Its brief life, its delicate beauty, had reminded you that all things, whether flowers or people, are temporary, and it was in their fleeting nature that they became so valuable. It wasn't just the beauty of the flower that had captivated you, it was the way it had been. It had existed fully, with grace, without fear of fading, without trying to hold on to its beauty. The flower had lived its truth, blooming and withering in its own time, and there was wisdom in that. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the trees, casting long golden beams across the garden, you sat by the spot where the flower had once stood. The air was warm, the scent of earth and flowers still hanging in the air from the spring rains. It was quiet here, peaceful, and as you sat, you allowed your thoughts to drift. You felt no rush, no need to move. You simply allowed yourself to be, to sit with the memory of the flower and the emotions that it had stirred within. The flower had been beautiful, yes, but it had also been fragile. Its beauty was not something that could be held onto forever, and perhaps that was the point. In its brief life, it had reminded you to appreciate the beauty of the moment, the way it existed in the here and now. There was no need to search for permanence in the impermanent. The flower had shown you that love, beauty, and peace could be found even in the most delicate things, even in the most fleeting moments. As you sat in the garden, you closed your eyes, allowing the sounds of the world to fill your senses. The rustling leaves, the soft chirp of birds in the distance, the warm breeze on your face. All of it was a part of the cycle of life, and in this moment you felt a deep, quiet acceptance wash over you. You didn't need to hold on to the past, to cling to the flower's beauty. It had been a gift, and gifts were meant to be cherished, not possessed. You began to understand that loss didn't have to be something painful. Loss was simply a part of the process, part of the rhythm of life. Everything, every petal, every leaf, every moment was part of a larger cycle, one that you were a part of. The flower had bloomed, it had taught you, and it had faded, but it had left behind something precious. The understanding that everything has its time, and that time is what gives everything its meaning. You stood up, taking one last look at the spot where the flower had been. There was no sadness in your heart now, only peace. The flower had done its job, and now it was time for you to move forward. Its lesson was not just in its blooming, but in its passing. It had shown you the beauty of the moment, the joy of simply being, and the peace of acceptance. The breeze picked up once more, gently swaying the trees, and you took a deep breath. The world was still turning, the seasons still changing, and you were a part of it. The flower had not left you, it had become a part of you, a quiet reminder of the beauty in every moment, and the peace that comes with letting go. You walked slowly back to the cottage, your steps light, your heart calm. The world around you seemed brighter somehow, not because it had changed, but because you had. The lesson of the flower had made you more aware, more present, and more grateful for the beauty that life offered, even in the smallest of things. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, you felt a quiet, profound peace settle in your heart. The flower had been a gift, and you had learned from it. You had learned that everything in life is fleeting, but it is that very fleetingness that makes it beautiful. You had learned to live fully, to appreciate what was before you, and to accept what would one day fade. And in this understanding, you found a kind of quiet joy, a joy that was not tied to the flower or to anything outside of yourself, but to the simple act of being, of living in the moment, and of embracing the natural rhythm of life. As the days continued to pass, the air grew warmer, and the earth beneath your feet seemed to hum with a quiet energy. The garden, though once dulled by the flower's absence, now felt different, renewed somehow. The patch of soil where the flower had once stood seemed to pulse with potential, like a canvas waiting to be painted. It was as if nature itself was whispering to you, inviting you to begin again, to find beauty in what had once been lost. You found yourself drawn to the garden every day, even more so now that the heavy weight of grief had lifted. Instead of feeling sadness as you had before, you felt a calm, a peaceful stillness that welcomed each new moment. The garden was no longer just a place where a flower had once bloomed. It was a space of possibility, a space where life, in all its forms, could begin anew. One morning, as you walked outside, the soft scent of earth and fresh greenery filled your lungs. You felt the cool touch of the morning dew against your skin, and you paused, allowing the stillness of the moment to wash over you. The garden was alive again, with new shoots poking through the soil, tender leaves unfurling in the warmth of the sun. It felt like a new beginning, a rebirth. The colors were brighter than before, the air richer with the fragrance of life. You knelt beside the soil where the flower had once stood, your hands gently pressing into the damp earth. The space felt sacred now, as if the ground itself had been transformed by the love and care you had given it. A quiet, unspoken promise filled your heart, the promise to continue nurturing, to continue growing. As you worked in the soil, pulling out weeds and loosening the earth, you thought back to the lessons the flower had taught you. The delicate bloom had shown you that life was fragile, that it was fleeting, but had also shown you the joy of living fully in the moment, of embracing what was before you. You realized that the flower's passing had not been an end, but rather a beginning of understanding, of transformation. With this new understanding, you decided to plant a seed in the very spot where the flower had once stood. You carefully placed it in the earth, covering it with rich, dark soil, and you whispered a quiet promise to it. I will care for you just as I cared for the flower. I will nurture you, watch you grow, and learn from you once more. The seed was small, barely visible in the earth, but it was full of potential. In that moment, you understood that life, like the garden, was always beginning anew. There would always be something to tend to, something to care for, whether it was a flower, a memory, or a dream. You did not need to hold on to what had been. You only needed to embrace what was here, now, and what could be in the future. Over the weeks that followed, you continued to visit the garden, watching the seeds slowly sprout and grow. Each day, the tiny plant grew taller, its leaves unfurling with delicate precision. It was not the same flower as before, but it was something new, something that had never existed until now. And with each new leaf that grew, with each new bud that formed, you felt a sense of fulfillment, as if the garden itself was teaching you to accept the present moment, to cherish the small steps of growth and renewal. The days began to feel longer, the sun shining brighter, and the garden blossomed with life. You would sit beside the young plant, your hand resting on the soft earth, and you felt a deep connection to everything around you. The garden, the soil, the flowers, everything was part of a larger cycle, one that you were now deeply a part of. You were not separate from nature, you were woven into it, a part of its ever-turning wheel. In those moments as you sat quietly, you could feel the gentle rhythm of life all around you. The pulse of the earth, the hum of the wind, the soft rustle of leaves in the trees. The world was constantly changing, constantly growing, and you were learning to embrace that flow. The sadness of the flowers passing had faded, replaced by a deep sense of peace. You no longer feared the inevitable losses of life. Instead, you understood that each loss made room for new growth, for new beginnings. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, you sat in the garden, the cool evening air settling around you. The young plant had grown tall, its leaves now vibrant green, and a small bud had begun to form at its center. It was not the same flower you had known, but it was beautiful in its own right. And as you gazed at it, you realized something profound. The flower, in all its beauty and fragility, had not been an end. It had simply made space for something new to emerge. You sat there in the quiet, watching the stars appear one by one in the night sky, and you understood that life was not about holding on to the past. It was about allowing the present moment to unfold, embracing the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. The flower had given you that lesson, and now, in the growing plant before you, you saw that lesson being passed on. You stood up, gently brushing the soil from your hands, and you felt a quiet joy in your heart. The garden was not the same as it had been, and neither were you. You had changed, you had grown, and you were no longer afraid of the inevitable changes life would bring. The garden, with its cycle of growth and loss, had taught you the most important lesson of all: to live fully in the present, to cherish what you have, and to trust that from every ending, something new and beautiful can emerge. As you walked back toward the cottage, the stars above shining brightly, you felt at peace, knowing that the garden and your heart were both full of life, ready to grow again. As the days passed and the garden flourished, the changes within you began to settle into a quiet harmony. The new plant, now growing steadily and strong, became a symbol of resilience and rebirth. The once empty space where the flower had stood was now filled with life once more. But this new growth was not just about the garden. It was about you too. The calm you had found in caring for the plants, in watching them grow and change, had begun to transform you from the inside. Every morning, you continued to visit the garden. The rhythm of your visits became a gentle routine, a sacred time you cherished. The sun would rise, casting soft golden beams across the garden, and you would walk slowly through the dewy grass, feeling the coolness of the earth beneath your feet. The soft rustling of the trees greeted you like an old friend, the song of birds filling the air as they flitted between the branches. The quiet of the morning was your time to reflect, to be with yourself, to acknowledge the beauty of the world around you. The young plant had grown, its leaves now large and vibrant, its stem tall and sturdy. Though it was not the same as the flower, it was beautiful in its own way, and each new bud that began to form reminded you of the quiet power of life's cycles. The rain would come, soft and gentle, nourishing the earth, and the sun would return to warm the soil, creating a delicate dance between light and water, between growth and rest. You had become a part of that cycle, just as much as the plants and trees around you. Sitting beside the young plant one evening, watching the soft glow of the sunset fade into the cool embrace of night, you felt a deep sense of peace settle in your heart. It was a peace you had not known before, a peace that came not from the absence of loss, but from the understanding that life's beauty exists not in its permanence, but in its fleeting nature. The flower's brief bloom had taught you that, and now, as you watch this new plant grow, you realized that its beauty was not diminished by the past. It was a new beginning, a fresh chapter that you were living right now. The air was cool and crisp, the evening breeze rustling through the leaves, carrying with it the scent of fresh earth and the faint, sweet fragrance of the flowers blooming in the garden. The stillness of the evening was comforting, and for a moment you allowed yourself to simply be. There was no need to rush, no need to worry about what would come next. The world around you was in perfect harmony, and so were you. You thought about the flower that had once bloomed so brightly, how it had touched your life, and how it had left. It was hard to imagine that it had ever been a part of this place, a part of you, and yet, in a way, it still was. Its memory lingered in the way you cared for the garden, in the way you saw life differently now. You had learned to appreciate the fragility of beauty, to embrace the impermanence of it, knowing that even in its fleeting nature, it brought something lasting, something that would remain in your heart. As the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, you found yourself reflecting more often on the lessons the garden had given you. You thought about the flower, the rain, the soil, the sun, all the elements that had worked together to create something beautiful. And you thought about how those same elements were working within you, how you too were part of a larger cycle, part of the natural rhythm of life that moved with gentle precision, even when you could not see it. You were no longer the person you had been before the flower arrived, before it faded away. You had grown just as the plants had grown, just as the garden had grown. And with that growth came a deeper understanding of yourself, of your place in the world, and of the world's place in you. You had learned that loss was not the end, but a part of the cycle. That everything, both beautiful and fleeting, was connected in a way that was both mysterious and profound. One afternoon you stood at the edge of the garden, the soft light of the setting sun casting a golden hue over everything. The plants were lush, the flowers were in full bloom, and the earth felt alive beneath your feet. You closed your eyes for a moment, breathing in the scent of the flowers, the fresh earth, and the gentle breeze. You felt a quiet gratitude fill your heart, an appreciation for the beauty that surrounded you, for the lessons that had come in both the flower's bloom and its passing. The garden, now a testament to both life and loss, had taught you everything you needed to know about the cycles of existence. You had learned that the beauty of life is found in the moments, in the brief bursts of joy and colour, and in the quiet spaces where growth happens. The flower had taught you that life could be fragile, but it had also taught you that growth, renewal, and peace were always possible, even after the hardest of times. And as the last light of the day faded, you felt a deep peace settle in your heart. The garden had become more than just a place of flowers. It had become a symbol of everything you had learned. You had accepted that everything changes, that nothing lasts forever, and that, in the end, the most important thing was to live fully in each moment. As the months passed, the seasons once again shifted, each one leaving its mark on the garden. The days became shorter, the sun's rays less intense, and the air grew cooler as autumn wrapped the world in its amber glow. The garden, which had bloomed so vibrantly during the summer, began to quiet down, but its beauty had not faded. It had simply changed, as it always did, with grace. The flowers that had once bloomed so boldly were now replaced by the soft, rich colors of fallen leaves, creating a patchwork quilt across the earth. You found yourself spending even more time in the garden, feeling the pull of its peaceful, quiet rhythm. The garden had become your refuge, the place where you could find solace, where the simple act of tending to the earth had become a form of meditation. There was something so deeply grounding about it, the way the earth seemed to respond to your touch, the way the plants slowly grew and changed, just as you had. In the evenings, as the sky darkened and the first stars began to appear, you would sit in your favorite spot in the garden, the place where the flower had once stood. Now, the space was filled with a different kind of life, plants that had sprouted in the wake of the flower's passing, each one growing in its own time, filling the space with new forms of beauty. You thought about how everything in life was like this, constantly changing, but always continuing, always growing in some way. The young plant you had nurtured had grown strong and healthy, its leaves vibrant and full of life. The bud that had once formed slowly unfurled into a small flower, delicate and pure. It wasn't the same flower that had been there before, but it was still beautiful in its own right, and you could feel the same quiet joy that had filled your heart when the original flower first bloomed. You had begun to see the garden in a new light, understanding that every plant, every flower, every leaf had a purpose, even if that purpose was brief. Life was not about holding on to what you loved forever. It was about experiencing it fully while it was here, appreciating it for the moment it was given to you. Just as the flowers had bloomed and faded, so too would your life and all the things you loved. But in that understanding, you found peace. Sitting in the cool, fading light of the evening, you could feel the weight of the quiet world around you. The sounds of the garden were now softer, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft calls of crickets in the growing dark. You felt the warmth of the earth beneath you, the cool air around you, and the peace of the moment surrounding you like a soft blanket. You realized that the garden had given you something you hadn't expected, a profound understanding of yourself. You thought about all that had happened in the time since you had first discovered the flower. The lessons it had taught you had been subtle, but they had shaped the way you saw the world. Life you'd learned was not about permanence, about trying to hold on to things. It was about the beauty of the present, about embracing each moment as it came. And in the garden, in the quiet spaces between the flowers and the changing seasons, you had learned to find peace. As you stood up, the cool night air brushing against your face, you looked around at the garden one last time. It had become a part of you, a quiet reflection of the cycles of life, of growth and decay, of love and loss. You felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons it had offered, for the way it had taught you to embrace change, to accept the passing of time, and to find peace in the process. You walked slowly back to your cottage, the stars now sparkling brightly overhead, casting their soft light over the earth. The world was quiet, and in that quiet you felt an overwhelming sense of calm. You had learned to be still, to be present, to live fully in each moment. And though the garden would continue to change just as you would, you knew that the peace you had found there would stay with you, like a quiet song playing softly in the background of your life. And as the night settled around you, you understood something profound. The beauty of life was not in its permanence, but in its fleeting moments. And in that truth you found a quiet joy, knowing that the gift of the garden, of the flower, and of the lessons they'd given you would continue to live within you, no matter where life took you. As the seasons continued to unfold their soft rhythms, the garden remained ever-changing, yet somehow always the same. The once vibrant blooms of spring and summer had given way to the muted tones of autumn, and now as winter approached, the garden lay in a quiet rest. The trees had shed their leaves, leaving the branches bare, their silhouettes stark against the pale blue sky. The ground was dusted with frost in the early mornings, a delicate layer of ice that shimmered in the light like the finest crystal. In this moment there was stillness. The garden had entered its dormant phase, the earth resting beneath the frost, waiting for the warmth of spring to awaken it once more. But for you, sitting quietly by the edge of the garden, the stillness was not empty. It was full of life, full of meaning. The lessons the garden had given you, the lessons of growth, loss, and renewal, had planted seeds within you, seeds that were now sprouting quietly in the depths of your soul. You had come to understand that the garden, like life, was a cycle. Things would bloom, they would fade, and they would return again in time. The flower which had once been the center of your world was gone now, but its essence remained. It had not truly left you, it had become a part of you, woven into the fabric of your being. The peace you had found in its passing had opened a door within you, one that led to a deeper understanding of your own life, of the quiet beauty of each moment. The plant you had nurtured, the one that had grown in the place of the flower, stood tall now, its roots deep in the soil, its leaves strong and vibrant. It had blossomed just as the flower had, and though it was different, it was no less beautiful. It was a reminder that from every ending, something new could begin. The flower had taught you that beauty was not in permanence, but in the fleeting nature of life, and that every loss held the potential for growth. The garden, like the world, was a place of change, and yet there was a quiet constancy within it. The earth, though it rested in winter, would awaken in spring. The buds would bloom, the flowers would return, and the cycle would begin again. And with each cycle, the lessons would deepen, the peace would grow, and the wisdom of the earth would be passed on. You sat by the garden, your hands resting lightly on your lap, and you thought about all that had happened in this place. You had come to the garden seeking something perhaps unknowable, and in the process you had found much more than you had expected. You had found acceptance, you had found peace, and you had found a deeper connection to the world around you. You had learned to appreciate the fleeting beauty of life, to embrace its inevitable changes, and to live fully in each moment, without fear of what might come next. The days grew shorter, the nights longer, and the chill of winter began to settle in. But there was no sadness in your heart now, only a quiet gratitude. The garden had given you more than you had ever anticipated. It had taught you how to live with grace, how to accept loss, and how to cherish the beauty of the present moment. And it had given you something that would stay with you always, a quiet, enduring gift, the ability to find peace in the midst of change. In the stillness of the garden, as the first snowflakes began to fall softly to the ground, you felt a deep sense of contentment. The garden would rest now, but in the spring, it would awaken again. And so would you. You had learned to move with the seasons of life, to accept each one as it came, knowing that even in the quietest moments, there was beauty to be found. You stood up slowly, brushing the snow from the ground where you had been sitting. The garden was quiet, but it was not empty. It was full of memories, full of lessons, full of life in its own way. You looked at the spot where the flower had once bloomed, and you smiled softly to yourself. The flower had taught you what you needed to know, that beauty, love, and growth could be found even in the briefest of moments. And with that lesson in your heart, you knew that the peace you'd found in the garden would continue with you, wherever life took you. You took one last look at the garden, the snow falling gently around you, and then you turned and walked back towards your home. The world was quiet, the night peaceful, and in that silence you found the greatest gift of all, the simple joy of being alive, of living fully in each moment, and of knowing that everything, in its own time, would bloom again. Winter had come and gone as it always did, leaving behind traces of its chill in the air, but with it, the promise of renewal. The garden, now blanketed under a soft layer of snow, lay still, waiting patiently for the warmth of spring to awaken it once more. The once barren branches of the trees, their limbs bare against the cold sky, began to swell with buds, tiny signs of life stirring beneath the surface. The earth, though quiet, was alive with potential, brimming with the secrets of what was to come. One crisp morning, as the first hints of spring began to edge their way into the world, you stepped into the garden once more. The air was fresh, cool, and brimming with the scent of damp earth and budding life. The ground, once frozen and still, had begun to thaw, softening in the embrace of the sun's first rays. You knelt down to the earth, your hands pressing gently into the soil, and you felt it, the subtle pulse of life that had returned with the change of the seasons. As you stood and surveyed the garden, you noticed the first signs of growth, tiny green shoots poking their heads from the soil, fresh and tender, reaching toward the sun. It was like watching life begin all over again, as if the garden were taking its first breath after a long, deep sleep. You couldn't help but smile as you observed the tender sprouts, their tiny leaves unfurling with delicate grace. The young plant you had nurtured, the one that had grown in the place of the flower, was now thriving, its stems strong and sturdy, its leaves thick and vibrant. It had grown taller over the winter months, reaching higher toward the sky. It was no longer the delicate shoot it had been, but a strong, living part of the garden's tapestry. The plant's first bloom had opened fully, revealing a small, delicate flower, a pale reminder of the one that had come before, but unique in its own right. There was something profoundly beautiful about the new bloom. It wasn't the same flower, it could never be, but it was something new, something born from the same soil that had once nourished the flower. And in that moment you realized that life, like the garden, was not about holding on to the past or trying to recreate what had been. It was about embracing what was here, now, and finding beauty in the changes that time brought. The flower had faded, but its lesson, its gift, had not been lost. It had been passed on quietly through the soil to the new growth that had emerged. You spent the next few days in the garden, watching as the soil warmed and the flowers began to bloom once more. The air was filled with the sweet scent of new growth, the gentle hum of bees returning to the blossoms, and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. The garden seemed to be alive again, bursting forth with colors and fragrances that had been absent during the winter months. The once empty spaces were now filled with life, each plant standing tall and proud, just as you had learned to do. The world around you was awakening, and with it, so were you. The peace you had found in the garden, the lessons of patience and acceptance, had become a part of you. You could feel the changes in yourself too. You had learned to embrace the passing of time, to accept the cycles of growth and decay, and to understand that every ending was simply the beginning of something new. The lessons you had learned from the flower, the fragility of beauty, the importance of living fully in the present, had become a part of your soul, guiding you through the changing seasons of life. As the days grew warmer, the garden continued to bloom, each flower, each leaf, each blade of grass a reminder that life was always in motion, always evolving. The rhythm of the seasons played out around you, and you had become part of that rhythm, part of the cycle of life. You had learned that change was not something to fear, but something to embrace. It was a natural part of the world, just as it was a natural part of your own growth. In the stillness of the garden, as you sat beside the young plant, now full of life and bloom, you felt a deep sense of gratitude. You had come to understand that life was not about avoiding loss, but about finding peace in the cycles of change. You had learned to appreciate each moment, to cherish each breath, to honor the beauty of the present. And as the sun set, casting a golden light across the garden, you knew that the lessons of the garden would remain with you. The flower, the plant, the earth, the sky, they were all part of the same cycle, part of the same journey. And in that understanding, you found a quiet peace that would stay with you, just as the garden, with its ever-changing beauty, would stay with you forever.